am here to do a little bit of a rant, I guess. Look, I should have been vlogging while I was reading this book. In fact, instead I've just been regaling my family members with all of the little nitpicky things about this book that are making me crazy. And the thing is, like, I don't hate the book, like, this, do I? I'm only 50 pages in, but they were like, you know what, you should just make a video about all of it, because maybe just because they're tired of me texting them, oh my god, this now and that now. Okay, so let's take a step back and talk about what's actually what I'm actually reading and what's actually going on. Okay, I put this book on my want to read list according to Goodreads only like a month ago. And I finally, eventually I just requested it and a bunch of other books from the library, and it came in, and I started reading it yesterday. It is well, they call it a remix, a Pride and Prejudice remix. It is a reimagining, I guess, of sorts, for a young adult audience, in which Elizabeth Bennet in the Jane Austen, classic, is actually a trans boy named Oliver, and only very specific friends of Oliver's know his true identity. And I'm here for it. First of all, I love Regency and Georgian era literature and settings. I love a good queer story. I have trans people in my life, so I'm always happy to see rep for that. The author themselves, I guess himself, is trans masculine. So I was really excited for this book. And I'm still really happy to see good rep, a good way of explaining the feelings, because this is all through, it's not first person, but it's through Oliver's POV, and, we're getting a sense of, like, how he feels when he's forced to present himself as Elizabeth Bennet and wear dresses, and, it's a really good, kind of look at that, I feel. That said, for me, and, the point is probably not accuracy to the time period or faithfulness to the source material. The point of this story is, to have that rep and I guess change it for a teen audience. But on page 8, I already have in my Goodreads, sorry, you can't see that, but in my Goodreads, I already have, all these notes as I'm reading. On page 8, I was like, only 8 pages in, and already, Bingley, if properly bred, would never ask a woman he has not been introduced to dance. He wouldn't even speak to her until someone introduced him. So, I just feel like some of the even most basic research for the time period, for Regency England, Georgian England, has been just neglected here. And if you, again, maybe the idea was that the audience wouldn't care, but you had to assume at least some of your audience was going to be Jane Austen readers, people who like things set in that time period, people who appreciate a little bit of authenticity, even just small things that just to readers for whom it matters, this is a glaring problem. Bingley hasn't been introduced to Jane. He just walks up, asks her to dance, doesn't introduce himself or ask her name either or anything, just would you like to dance? She's like, yes. I'm like, oh my god, no. This is not correct. This is not how this would go. So then, also, at the Meryton Ball, Oliver, dressed as Elizabeth, is, looking at Darcy across the room and talking about the boys dark eyes drew, Oliver in, and I'm just like, boy. But apparently, I guess from what I'm gathering here, the characters have been aged down, and yet somehow Bingley and Darcy and the others are renting a house. Like they've let, as it said, they've let Netherfield. But I'm like, they're like what, 19? Like, so either they're old enough to be out on their own, letting a property, and therefore adults and should not be called boys, or they should not be positioned as if they are wealthy young men who are out in the world on their own. Like, it doesn't make sense. There's a dissonance there. And that's the other thing. At one point, Longbourn, which is where the Bennets live, right? It's their estate. It's entailed. That's kind of the whole point. They don't have any sons in the original story, so that's why all the daughters really need to get married and find ways to take care of themselves in the world, because at some point when their father dies, Longbourn will go to their next cousin, male cousin. So it's an estate. And Netherfield is a neighboring estate. That's why it's a big deal when these handsome young men move into Netherfield. Okay, so, but it's at one point, Longbourn in this book was referred to as a townhouse. They keep just walking into London. I'm like, are they in London for some reason? London was a completely, distant location in Pride and Prejudice, right? Like, you had to travel to London. You got in a carriage and you went to London. You didn't just walk into town to go to the fair or whatever. Like, I can't even, because, I guess, who needs geography, right? Like, it's like, oh, they're just they're there somewhere-ish. The lack of attention to these kinds of details is problematic for me. Charlotte Lucas is now Charlotte Lewis and has a female lover whose husband is an army, or he's in the military at any rate. So there's that. I don't have a problem with that. That's kind of a fun and interesting little touch, I guess. But so okay, at one point they're at the fair. So Oliver goes to the fair. He has this whole system for sneaking out, changing into men's clothing, and then going out in the world dressed as a man, as himself, if you want to say that. But he goes to the fair, he runs into Bingley and Darcy the night after the Meryton Ball, and of course Bingley and Darcy don't appear to recognize him as Elizabeth Bennet. So he first of all tells them to call him Oliver, and at least the author was aware enough to note that was kind of a weird thing to debate, because gentlemen usually refer to each other by their surname or their title, or whatever, but first names are really only for close relatives, and Christian names, as it were. And yeah, so, but then they go and they're eating these little meat pies, and something about warm on their hands, and I was like, they'd have been wearing gloves. A gentleman would not have just been out wandering around barehanded. And then later, after going down to breakfast at Longbourn and coming back up to their room, Oliver has his feet on a carpet, like a rug, and is like, oh, it's on his bare feet. And I'm like, he'd have been wearing stockings. You're not running around barefoot. In fact, you'd be wearing slippers, really, because you don't want your stockings to snag either. But at the very least, you'd be wearing stockings. If you came into your room, kicked off your shoes, and walked around in your stocking feet, I guess, maybe. But you definitely aren't walking around barefooted. Okay? So, it's just... Oh, yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. And the thing is, like, I'm not hating they also go to, like, basically the equivalent of a Barnes and Noble. Like, it's the Temple of the Muses, which is a big bookstore, lending library, bookstore, I guess, because Darcy buys books. But, you know, it's like, oh, there's a circulation desk and there's 2 levels and you can just sit and read. And I'm like, is this a It's a Barnes and Noble, I guess. It sounds like a Barnes and Noble. Anyway, also, so Darcy is at the Meryton Ball, standoffish and rude, as per Jane Austen's original. But then at the county fair, when, you know, Oliver is dressed as Oliver, Darcy, you know, warms up to him. They find that they have things like books in common. They invite him to Watier's. Like, that was the other thing. I was like, okay, so that's in London. Are they? So I mean, the Bartholomew Fair is in London too. It's in Smithfield. But like, yeah, it just. But then Darcy being pleasant, even to the point that at one point Darcy admits to Oliver when Oliver misconstrues. Here's a word. Something. Darcy just says, oh, I'm not good at the social thing. I rely on Bingley for that. And I'm like, part of the fun of Pride and Prejudice is that Darcy is so stiff-necked that, like, he comes off as this kind of way, and then it turns out he's not that way at all. He's just awkward. But to have it brought forward within the first 50 pages and just be like, oh, you know, I'm like, where then? I assume, because again, I am only 50 pages in, I assume the tension will come when Darcy treats Oliver, when Oliver's dressed as Elizabeth, differently from Oliver, although I already suspect that Darcy kind of knows, like, that he's kind of already, I mean, he's no dummy. Bingley maybe, but Darcy's pretty acute. So, yeah, so again, I find all of this really distracting from the story. And that's a personal thing, and that's like a personal fixation. Maybe it's my autism, but like, I'm like, if you're gonna do this, why not at least do the basics of making sure people are dressed properly, you know, that they're observing the niceties and mores of the time. Why, again, are they in London? Like, practically, or like close enough to literally walk into London? Like, that just, I'm boggled. I can't wrap my brain around the geography here. I'm hoping at some point, again, it's me fixating on probably the wrong thing. Like, that's not the point of the story. It's not why this story is being told in this new, different way. But it's still, for me, and I think potentially for other readers who enjoy Jane Austen or enjoy historical fiction and are, you know, at least even passing aware. It's not like I have some scholarly degree in the time period the way some people do, but like, or at least passingly aware of some of the basics. Like, if I'm picking out all this stuff, I don't know what somebody with even greater knowledge than I have would think or feel about this book. I don't know. It's part of a series. I guess they've done several of these remixes. It's a cute idea. I mean, you know, and again, no hate to the premise or even like the author, you know. I just feel like somebody in the editing or somewhere should have flagged up a bunch of this and been like, you know, they should have run it by somebody with a little bit of more knowledge of the period if the author themselves was not going to to do that. Anyway, that's me 50 pages into Most Ardently. Yes, I am going to finish it. This is not going to be a hate read because, again, I don't dislike the story thus far, although, again, Darcy being nice is a kind of, I'm like, then where's, I guess the conflict is supposed to be Oliver and his situation. But thus far, like, he's got supportive people in his life, and he's making it work. His biggest concern is at some point he's going to be expected to marry and live as a woman, and he just feels like that would kill him, which, you know, I get it. He is attracted to other men, so that, you know, is potentially problematic, right? And so on and so forth. But I don't know. I think we're about to meet the, like, who is it? Willoughby? Is that his name? We're about to meet, what's his face? The Pride and Prejudice, like, antagonist, who isn't Darcy, because Darcy is an antagonist for Elizabeth through a lot of that novel, right? Like, or he's her foil, I guess. But if Darcy's not going to be that here, I guess we're going to transfer, like, the animosity elsewhere. I don't know. I'm not going to, well, when I finish the book, well, I mean, if I keep being angry, I'll make some update videos. But when I finish the book, we can go over the whole thing, I guess. This was meant to be a really short, but, you know, I have to give everything context and credit where it's due, and, you know, it's not a bad story or you know, premise, but it's some of the execution, yeah. So anyway, I do have more Iliad coming if people are interested. So that'll be, I think, up sometime this coming week. But in any case, until next time, take care.